So I need to make a special jump box for the race car, just to aid in starting it so we're not sucking the battery dry. So I've got a jump box here from Harbor Freight and some components and stuff I made. So I'm going to kind of cut it apart and make it work for what I need. So I bought these plugs offline, and I've got some battery cables. So I need to cut the battery end off and hook the ring terminal up to the car, and then I'm going to cut the clamp ends off of our jump box and put the other end of the plug on. That way it quick plugs in. So I'll start to get unboxing and cutting ends off. Alright, so I got the clamps all cut off, ends trimmed, and the insulation stripped off. So what I'm going to do next is I've got some tinning butter here. I like to apply it to the cable first, just so it's down inside the terminal, because we are going to crimp them as well as solder them. So I'm just going to kind of smear some of this on there on both terminals. Set that to the side. So then we can take our ends that go inside the plug, and we've got a wire, or a big cable crimper here. We get our end all crimped, like so. Then we can take our other end and repeat the process. Alright, so now with both ends crimped, I'm going to lay it over the table here. Just kind of stick it under there to help hold it. And we're going to take our little propane torch and we'll heat the ends up and heat it up down here. That way it wicks and pulls the solder in. Everything's soldered up, and from here, with it melting the insulation back just a little bit and there being some exposed conductive material, I've got some heat shrink tube, so I'm going to slide that over, and that will protect the ends as well as kind of finish everything off. And then I've got our heat gun here. So I'll let it warm up and we'll shrink the heat shrink tube. Alright, so from here we're going to take it one step farther so we don't have these cables just kind of flopping around after we put the connector on. So we're going to take a large piece of heat shrink and I'm going to slide it up to the top here. Then we'll take another piece of heat shrink and it'll stay here at the bottom. And it'll kind of bind them together a little bit. So I'm going to shrink the bottom first, just making sure that I leave enough slack to be able to put the connector on. So to dress this up a little bit, I've got this expandable loom, and at this point I'm just going to test fit it to make sure we put the rear piece of heat shrink in the right location so I can overlap it onto the front one we just put on. So I want to line that up to where we can slightly overlap that. Stretch this back, and we need to move this heat shrink backwards. So I'll slide that up to where I can access it. Then we'll shrink the back piece. I'm just going to trim off some of these frayed edges there. And while we're at it, I think I'm going to add just a small piece for the center, just to help tie it all together. So then we can reinstall our sheath here. We can take another piece of heat shrink that's just a little bit bigger in diameter, so it can go over the cables and our sheathing here. Make sure to tuck that down in there. And we'll shrink this down. And one more piece. And this one will slide all the way up here to the top. All right, and now you can see that, I mean, this is a nice, good looking cable all the way around. And it just looks like a nice, professional, finished off piece. And then from there, we can take our connector, and I can chase this wire because I kept them nice and bundled straight. So this is our positive side, and it goes into the positive side of the connector. Negative goes into the negative side. And we just snap it into the connector. And there we have the finished end for the carry pack. So from there, I have to attach this one to the side of the car, and I whipped up this little aluminum bracket just on the shear and the sheet metal brake, and I polished it up so it matched the rest of the car. So I've got to take the hood top and the hood side off, and I'll show you how I'm going to mount this, where I'm going to mount it, and we'll get the car side of the install done, and we'll be able to hook up our temporary jumper box whenever we need to start the car. Alright, so I wanted to show you guys this before I took the hood side off. So with me making the bracket, what I want to do is I want to be able to plug the jump box into the connector using this fire door access. That way I don't have to have the whole hood side off when we're on the starting line. So the way I made this bracket is in here. You can see this section of the motor mount plate, and I want to be able to bolt that on here and still have the door closed. So I just wanted to show you kind of what the goal is with the layout. Because I had the bracket upside down. So when it bolts, it'll be like this, and it still gives fire access as well as being able to bolt the connector in place. So next up, I'm going to pull the hood side off, and we can fit that up, drill it, and bolt that on. All right, here you can see the area that we're going to be mounting the bracket a little bit better. So when I designed the bracket, I made it to where it would be flush on the front and flush across the top. So I'm going to mark where our holes are. And then I'll center punch those and drill them. And I'll go ahead and pull this plastic access plug out. So then I can come in and I can put the bolts in through the inside, nut it on the outside, and get this side all finished up. All right, so now I'm going to put our connector back on the bracket, and I'm just going to snug it up with the ratchet so it doesn't wiggle around. And now I'll put the hood side back on and just check for clearance and make sure it's exactly where I want it to be inside the fire door. Alright, so this is why we check things a lot. So it clears the door, but it doesn't clear the inside of the Hartwell latch. So it kind of gets hung up on that, and it just makes things a little difficult. And I can see right where it's making contact. It's not with the plug, it's with the aluminum bracket. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark it, and we're just going to cut about that much off of the bracket so it clears the center point of our Hartwell latch, and that should correct the problem, because we can make it close, it's just not ideal. So we'll modify that, take it all back off and get it trimmed up and put back on. So let's try that again. I got the bracket notched out, you can see here. So we'll put it back on and test fit it again. All right. So that's much better. It's close, and it may contact the bracket just a touch, but it should be all right. It's just super close. It's just hitting the aluminum again, not necessarily the plastic. I'll move the camera for a top view and see if you guys can see it, but I don't know if it's enough to worry about, because as the door starts to swing out, it may just graze the backside of it, and it's very minimal. So now I can take the side back off. We'll hook up our feed wires that'll go to this connector and get everything trimmed, soldered, and hooked up, and get this project wrapped up. So these are our charge lug terminals that run up to some circuits in the front that tie in with the rest of the electrical system and the battery. So I have our two leads here that are going to run from those terminals up to our jumper connector. So the first thing I'm going to do is crack these terminals loose, and then I can hook our wires up. I'm just going to loosely route them into place for now. And the power's turned off to the car on the main switch, so these are not hot currently. So it looks like our negative wire is actually already the right length, and we only need to trim just a touch off of our positive lead here. So for this, I was just getting a rough length, and I can take our wires back off and our connector back off, and we can finish this part of the wiring up on the bench. So I'm going to trim our red wire where we marked it, and I will take our terminals for our connector and just come in and mark the depth of that. I'll take our cutters here, and it has this notch for cutting the insulation off. Then we're going to repeat what we did on the other terminal. We're going to take our tinning butter here. Then we will slide the terminal itself on and crimp. So now we can set up to solder these. I've just got a piece of tubing there to help hold the wire. And same as before, we'll heat up the the end. So now, just like before, we can apply our heat shrink over the top. Then we can repeat that process on the negative terminal. So from this point, we can go ahead and put these leads into our connector, and it has a positive and negative notation on here. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And I'm also going to use the loom that we used on the other cable, and I can go ahead and put that on and make a note of how much we need to trim back off. Then we can come back with our oversized heat shrink again and go over the top to hold everything back together. Part's all wrapped up, it's ready to put back on the car, and we can get this small project buttoned up. So I'm going to start by putting the plug back in. And I'll put our terminals back on the corresponding lugs. Kind of tuck that wire out of the way there. Alright guys, that about wraps it up on our jump pack project here for the race car. I had an extra one of the connectors off an older project, so I went ahead and just drilled and screwed that through the old hold down. That way I've got a place that I can plug in our connector and it kind of stays up out of the way. So I want to thank you guys for checking out this video and a bunch of our other videos on this channel. So please make sure to rate, review, and subscribe. Leave us a comment on what you think of this video and our others. I'm really trying to grow our channel, so your feedback is much appreciated. And again, I appreciate you watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.